Sympathetic nervous system. When you're in a situation you find threatening, your stress response is activated. The way you respond depends on how seriously you view the threat, and the response is controlled by two parts of your nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for the fight or flight response. It gives you energy when you may need to run away from when you sense threat. This includes what I've bulleted point on the slide now. I'll give you a minute to look through those. Now we'll go on to the parasympathetic nervous system. Once the stress has passed, the parasympathetic nervous system begins to work. The parasympathetic system helps you to relax. It achieves this by producing the following responses. Again, I'll give you a couple of seconds to look over these. That's done for stress now, and we're on to anxiety. Here again, like the first two subjects I've talked about, there's this is the definition of it. Firstly, my own. Secondly, one I've found. The result of an interaction between the individual and the environment, a response to the demands placed upon the individual by the environment. A negative emotional state with feelings of nervousness, worry, and appreciation associated with activation or arousal of the body. This is found in the Matt Jarvis Sports Psychology book, found on eBay. Firstly, to start with anxieties, there are two main types of anxiety: trait anxiety and state anxiety. Firstly, I'm going to talk about trait anxiety. Trait anxiety is an aspect of personality and part of an individual pattern of behaviour. It is a behavioural tendency to feel threatened even in situations that are not really threatening, and then to respond this with high level of state anxiety. A sporting example of this may be feeling insecure when swimming about your body as you are revealing your body when getting into the pool. Now I'm going to speak about state anxiety. State anxiety is a temporary, ever-changing mood that is an emotional response to any situation considered threatening. A sporting example of this would be at the start of the Champions League final in 2008, where Chelsea played Manchester United. John Terry may have had high levels of state anxiety, but as the game begins and goes on, those anxiety levels may have gone down. But as it goes to a penalty shootout at the end of the game, state anxiety levels will increase, and in the real game itself, he ends up missing the penalty to win the Champions League. Manchester United later went on to win the penalty shootout. The types of state anxiety are cognitive state anxiety, somatic state anxiety, and behavioural response. Cognitive anxiety. I'm now going to talk about cognitive anxiety. Cognitive anxiety refers to negative thoughts, nervousness, and worried experience in certain situations. Symptoms of cognitive state anxiety include concentration problems, fear, and bad decision making. When a person's concentration levels drop, so does their performance. This makes the levels of anxiety and arousal increase further due to the amount of mistakes they are making. This means increased levels of arousal can lead to increased levels of cognitive anxiety, which can lead to more mistakes made in performance. Later on I will talk about concentration. For now, a sporting example of this would not be knowing where to put a penalty, so therefore hesitating and missing. The symptoms for cognitive anxiety are in front of you now. Give you a couple of seconds to look over those now. Now we're on to somatic anxiety. Somatic anxiety is where your perception of physiological changes that happen in particular situations. Things such as increased heart rate, increased breathing rates, sweating, and muscle tension may occur. For example, an athlete could be worried as they sense an increased heart rate at the start of a game, if they have gone into it less prepared than normal. This increase in heart rate is actually beneficial to performance, but the athlete can perceive it as a negative thing. A sporting example of this would be a basketball player sweating when taking a free throw. Again, I'll give you a couple of minutes to look over the symptoms for somatic anxiety. Now we're on to behavioural response. This is our pattern of behaviour when we're experiencing stress. A sporting example of this would be biting your nails when playing golf. Here are the symptoms of behavioural response, and I'll let you look over those. Okay, now we're on to the definition of negative mental state. The definition of anxiety suggests that there is a negative mental state characterized by worry and appreciation. It suggests that if this negative mental state starts to become too great, for example, worry too much, your performance will therefore suffer. A sporting example of this would be Andy Murray was worrying too much about playing the Wimbledon final, worrying about his opponent, worrying about the field of play, worrying about letting his fans down. His performance therefore might suffer. Constantly worrying about an event can make you think that you are not good enough for the event, so you will think you will not succeed, which will therefore make your performance dip. This would therefore be a loss of self-confidence, and it will add up to make you feel as if you are less likely to win, and you have always lost belief in yourself, which makes you feel like you are less likely to win. This is also linked, which is called a decreased expectation of success. Using a different sporting example here, Rory McIlroy went into the US Open constantly worried about the event. It will make him feel like he is less likely to win, which will lead to a decrease in performance and cover both aspects of loss of self-confidence and decreased expectations of success. Heightened cognitive anxiety means there is an increase in nervous appreciation or worry. Looking at it from a different approach here, athletes worry a lot, and a lot of them are scared of failure. Once athletes start to focus on failure, the more likely it will happen. So this means, in simpler terms, if you're worrying about losing, you're more likely to lose. Heightened fear of failure could result in negative physiological responses. This being hyper-elevated muscle tension and lack of movement coordination, which will affect performance negatively. I'll use Andy Murray as another sporting example here. If he suffered from fear of failure, he will get nervous and start to worry about failure. So therefore will have the fear of failure, and when he starts to focus on failure, there is a higher chance this will happen. This will therefore lead to hyper-evaluated muscle tension, lack of movement coordination, which will affect his performance in a negative way. Now I'm going to talk about concentration. The negative effects of anxiety can be concentration and attention levels. This also links in with arousal, but I feel it was necessary to talk about this now. I have also used some sporting examples in relation to concentration earlier on. Concentration is your ability to link movement and awareness to focus of what you are doing. It gives you a competitive edge over opponents. It lets you evaluate all situations thoroughly, which therefore leads to performing on a high level. People with high arousal levels exhibit more concentration and focus. People with low arousal levels may experience low concentration, similar to when you wake up in the morning in bed and how you feel. High concentration and focus benefits an athlete's performance. This is because it can lead to hypersensitivity to irrelevant stimuli or blind athletes to other relevant information. Low concentration and focus can affect an athlete's performance, as it can mean they don't have the capacity to perceive and respond to relevant sensory information. Different sports need to have different levels of concentration and arousal. A sporting example of this would be in weightlifting. You need to have a high level of arousal but limited concentration, and in darts this would be the opposite. As arousal increases, it can also affect your attention span. When your arousal is low, you have a broad attention span compared to when you have optimal attention span, where your arousal is optimal and then therefore you have an optimal attention span. This means you are focused on all things important, like explained earlier, where the keeper is standing when you're taking a shot in football, and how much power you need because you assessed how far out away you are from the goal, and if you need to put any curve on the shot if a defender is standing in your way. Then finally, when you are highly aroused, you have narrow vision, known as tunnel vision, and you have a narrow attention span. This is also known as tunnel vision, like I just said. Like the sporting example I gave earlier about a bad tackle and not thinking of the consequences, aka a red card. When you are in an important moment of the match, for example a penalty kick in rugby, your attention and concentration levels will be high. This can therefore lead to becoming optimally aroused, which therefore means attention is going in the correct direction, as it will be focused on the important aspects of the game, which in this moment would be scoring a penalty and 3 points for your team. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy.